This is the Neurosurgery Podcast. Welcome back to the Neurosurgery Podcast. Tonight we are delighted to be joined by two guests, rare for us. We got a crowd here. Dr. Kevin Hines at Jefferson, a practicing neurosurgeon, and a medical student there at Jefferson, Mary Pontarelli, who are both here to tell us about an exciting new venture they're doing there at Jefferson called the Neurosurgical Newsletter. Yet another wonderful platform to bring news, information, fresh science to the entire community out there interested in what's fresh and new in the world of neurosurgery. Thank you both for coming on the show to tell us about the newsletter. Dr. Hines, take a moment, say hello, and introduce yourself to the audience.
Oh, thanks for having me. Kevin Hines at Thomas Jefferson. I do functional and spine there. I'm a homegrown product, so I stayed on after residency, and I'm very proud of the education. And I think because of that, very interested in education and helping out medical students and early residents. So that's a little bit of my interest. And then obviously, it gives me a chance to work with great students like Mary.
And speaking of, Mary, welcome to the show. Please take a moment and say hello yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hi, I'm Mary. I'm a second-year medical student at Jefferson in Philly. I went to the University of Delaware prior to here, and I'm a Philly local, so I've been around the city my whole life. I love the city. I've loved Jefferson, and it's a really great place to be a student at.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you both for your time. We're all so busy, medical school, working in practice, taking the time to come on the show. We really appreciate it. Mary, why don't we start with you? Tell us about the Neurosurgical Newsletter. And before we get into, what does it cover? What's the content? Who came up with the idea? How did this all start?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was definitely a team effort. But the whole goal of the newsletter is to provide a one-stop shop basically for where you can get a quick update on neurosurgery research without having to go to various different journal websites, read different articles, read different abstracts. And most of them are written by medical students or residents. So they're reviewed by medical students, they're written by medical students, and they have much more of a kind of bland and basic tone to them rather than a high level science reading. So it's great for when you're first starting medical school, or if you just want a quick read to go through basically what's happening that week. The ultimate goal is that we do this as a weekly newsletter. Right now, we're just kind of trying to get it off the ground, and we've been doing monthly, and we're building our team now. But the ultimate goal is that it'll be a weekly newsletter where you can kind of just get one email to your inbox and then have a quick overview of the various research in each of the subspecialties.
Yeah. That reminds me, Dr. Wang, do you remember we used to write those Science Times articles for World Neurosurgery back when I was a medical student? And that's such a great venue to get medical students involved on both ends of the process, both in terms of writing, because you got to go out and find the articles and then distill it down to a more digestible kind of language, but then also those articles that you're producing in the newsletter are more digestible for medical students who are also trying to get in, understand, and learn the news. And believe me, we know how hard it is to produce things weekly. Once a week posting it doesn't sound like a lot, but it is ambitious once you get rolling. Dr. Hines, how have you found the time to carve out of your day? You're in practice, you have academic and educational obligations, and now you're taking on this whole new beast. How did you find the time to carve out for this?
I think the biggest credit goes to Mary and the team that she's put together to start this. The team is motivated. I don't feel like I'm doing the heavy lifting. I feel like it's more of an advisory role, which is a luxury. I think it's important too. I think that as it grows, I think it fosters not only students and early learners reading more, but also the people who are involved in the newsletter are able to help generate this content. And that's a whole different kind of learning, to try to read an article, distill it, think critically, and try to inspire some dialogue. So I think it's important. I think it's fun, and there's a great team, and we're looking for more for people who want to be involved. So it's an awesome way to network, to meet people, and learn some new skills. So like I said, I think that's what's made it easier or able to make the time for me, is it's very well done ahead of time, and we can review it, and it's not much has to be changed. I can tell you they're doing a great job.
Kevin, I have a quick question for you. I'm already excited about it. How do you get a hold of this? How do you get on the email feed? Is there a website? Is it an app?
Yeah, it's neurosurgicalnewsletter.com, and there it has Instagram, Twitter/X. So there's accounts for all of it. I think the website, you can go there and subscribe, and then there's also links to try to be part of the team on that website. So there's
Perfect.
a bunch of ways to find it, but neurosurgicalnewsletter.com is the website. So hopefully easy for people to find.
And Mary, what journals do you like? How do you know which ones to capture? Like, I assume you're going with the high level ones, right? But how low, how low do you go? Maybe is a question.
Yeah, so it was something we talked about a lot in the beginning because we definitely didn't want to cherry pick journals either and just be picking from the same ones over and over. So we gave each of the writers and editors kind of an outline of what like the typical journals for each subspecialty that people usually publish, like randomized control trials, meta-analyses. Like we kind of set the standard there. But something that we're hoping to incorporate is doing alternating with the weeks. Like 1 week will be a newsletter, and then 1 week focusing on like a case series or a question of the week to highlight some things that wouldn't be normally included in the regular newsletter. So that way people can maybe like actively learn with it and try and think of the diagnosis themselves, or just read a really cool case report.
Well, Kevin, I'm going to kick it over to you. Like, Michael Puso would probably chastise me for asking these questions, but like, the editorial world has an inherent politic or bias to it, right? So you guys are just kicking off, but how are you prepared to handle like, let's say there's negative commentary on Mike Wang's article? Like, would I have like a ability to respond, and say, oh my God, you guys reviewed my article and like I didn't feel it was adequately reviewed, or you didn't put me in the best light? Do you have? I mean, this is what interests me about the world. It's actually quite dramatic, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the way that it's been constructed will hopefully allow for discourse in a way. So the site itself is going to have, it's formulated as kind of a very, summarizing type, straightforward. This is what was found, and this is what the message was from the article, from the writers. The best that we can stay true to that. And then the idea is that you'll be able to link out to the social media, and then that's where I think a lot of the discourse can happen. So we're not going to try to in the newsletter say, here's the findings, this is why I think they're great, or this is why I totally disagree with everything that was written. But that gives you the ability to link it out to your Instagram, your Twitter, and say, oh, this was in the newsletter, very interesting, but I think this because I think you have this limitation, as everyone likes to do. And I think that's I think there's been some attempts at this, and I think you see it sometimes in the Doximity newsletter that goes out if you've clicked your preferences correctly. I think LinkedIn has a little bit of this as well with some of the case discussion, and I think that kind of pulling it in this way will hopefully allow people to take it across whatever platform they want, and also save you. There are some of those that requires about 8 clicks to get to anything you're trying to read, and I find that quickly discourages me from learning and reading if I'm in between something and I have a chance to read an article for 12 seconds.
Yeah, so Becker style sparsity on the website, and then YouTube comments on the social media for the bloodbath. Love it. Yeah. And what's fun about this conversation that I'm realizing as we go is that the questions that are occurring to me to ask you two are the questions that we got in the early days of the podcast. So here's one of my favorites that we had to wrestle with for a long time. For at least in your conception now, what do you think about patients accessing the newsletter? Do you intend to have patient-specific content or some kind of disclaimer that says, hey, this is, again, talking about when you get out into the social media and people are discussing articles, or some kind of disclaimer that says, hey, these are professionals talking to professionals. And that's what people always asked us. Should patients listen to this podcast? What do you think, people will feel about hearing you talk about behind the scenes working as surgeons? And we say, look, it's a talk show for neurosurgeons about neurosurgery. We're not giving away any secrets here, but our show is geared toward the professionals on our side of things. In your conception of the newsletter, are you thinking this is going to be completely separate from the public in general and just for professionals? Or do you think maybe one day you might work in something that's more patient facing? Mary, why don't we start with you?
So it's funny you say that because I was looking through the subscribers before we came on this podcast, and you have an option to put your affiliation in. And there were about 15 people that said, I have, and then name the condition. And it was,
Ah,
yes, it was definitely not something like this, at least in my mind, was not intended for a patient centered audience. It was much more medical student, resident, attending level. But then it really opens up a kind of a new avenue where they want to hear the new things that are going on in the field too that may pertain to them. So even though at least on my end it was definitely not a planned thing, it definitely did reach some patients and they are subscribed. So I think it's something that we can definitely look into, but it is really neat to see that it's reaching a non-medical audience too.
I
yeah.
like the idea of disclaimer saying it's for medical people. I think that, I'm glad you bring that up. The way that I think that these should be done is, uh, similar to how you guys have done it, is that you're transparent. This is what it is. There's nothing to hide, but this is a discussion that, may not be geared towards people who are not in the field, right? So if we put an article up and put the findings and some comments and people argue about it, this is people having a discussion about it that are hopefully professional about it and are taking it to a high level to hopefully push it forward or make, possibly inspire new studies or new things like that. But we're the option of having a patient facing summary or a patient facing guidelines is interesting, but very challenging because the upkeep of that whenever it's patient facing is if something changes, if there's new data, if there's something that says a certain medication is not necessarily beneficial, you open up this can of worms of, well, this was published and, it's a
Yeah.
super challenging thing. So I think right now we're keeping it mostly, facing towards the neurosurgical educational sphere, but there's definitely the potential to have something like that if we have the interest and the support and the people who want to contribute.
Yeah, the other thing I'm curious about talking about disclaimers is not just interactions with the patients, but you're both at an institution with a big name, one in practice, one a medical student. You're going to be applying soon, and now you're putting this content out there on the internet where things are forever. And to your point, if you design the content such that it's very straightforward, cut and dry, this is what an article said, that's great, but these conversations can always spiral out as they get out into the world. So uh, I guess the way you answer may answer the question itself, but what's the PR policy like at Jefferson? Like, has there been? Did you have to talk to anyone? Are there any concerns about that? Uh, Dr. Hines, you're in the department, so maybe you could answer that question at a different level, and then Mary, we can dig into what this may look like for you on the trail.
So the Neurosurgical Newsletter is not affiliated with any institution. It is
Okay.
similar, and I've seen this. It's our views, our perspectives, and really the nice thing about the newsletter is when you're kind of trying to summarize, an article or something like that, and you stay true to what the article says. If you do a good job, there's not a lot of liability on what is on the site. It's where people take it, say, in the discussions, but since that's
Yeah.
also on social media platform, you can encourage anyone to be involved. Just everyone remember that, like you said, what you put on the internet is forever. So this is a lot of Jefferson students are interested and involved, but this is open to anyone interested in neurosurgery to participate. This is meant to be, I think, the one of the main things, we talk about, reading literature, staying up to date. It's, kind of trying to inspire some discussion or dialogue, and then even learning to produce these summaries as things that are the goal. But I think ultimately the underlying theme, similar to a lot of these outlets, is to develop more neurosurgical community because the numbers are low in any one place, but across the country, across the world, that's where the strength in the community is, trying to bring it together. So there's a lot of medical students who have varying amounts of mentorship at their institution. There's a lot of people who have all the right intangibles, but don't necessarily have the access to the knowledge, technical, and mentorship kind of pillars of getting forward. So I think with that as the spirit, we're not affiliated with an institution. This is meant to be open for everyone so that we can, I think that makes things simpler, certainly, than making it any sort of affiliate, but two, be more inclusive with everyone.
So, Kevin, is Jim Harrop going to insist that all ISAS journals get the full review?
Yes, definitely. He'll probably send me one of his articles each week that as he's publishing it to put on there.
He is the editor in chief of that journal. And question for you, Mary, maybe more like I'd love your response on this, and I'd make a plea maybe because it's so funny. Like at least for now, it's still pretty easy for me to pick out when people are using AI to write or even do their presentations. And I've now started to detect when people are just reading off AI at a meeting, or and it's always very. You had mentioned earlier bland. Are you guys going to allow the people? Because I worry about this that they're just going to use AI, and if so, why? I guess why would you guys even exist, right? Like you guys are humans, right? You don't need AI. You guys are the intelligence, not and non-artificial, real natural intelligence. What is your policy or approach to that?
Right. So that was a big thing for us in the beginning. It's absolutely a no AI space.
There you
So
go.
all of the articles are read and by our writers and the editors together. And then basically the process is the writers will then draft their summary and then the editors read it and make changes after reading the article. So it's really a collaborative effort and hopefully they're not really long blurbs. They're about 150 words we put max. So it really isn't something that I feel you should need AI to write in a 150 word blurb. But one other thing that is unique about it that AI you would be able to tell is that we have our summaries structured exactly the same for all of them. So they take the background for about one or two sentences that the paper gives. Then you bold the statistically significant findings. And then the last sentence or two is how this relates to clinical management. So everything is very like step one, step two, step three to make sure that everyone's doing it the exact same way and that we can tell if AI does it. And it also really makes it nice because when you're reading something, it's interesting to see how it would apply to clinical practice rather than just hearing, the statistically significant finding and then ending it there.
Yeah, well, so Mary, if you could, I want you to make a pitch to anyone who's listening that is currently a medical student or a junior resident. Not to be a consumer. Everyone should consume the newsletter, right? Everyone should read it, but not everyone has as much time to be involved and contribute. So maybe I know that uh, you started this less than a year ago, but talk a little bit about what the experience has been like for you, not just building it, but going through the process of collecting the articles, writing these summaries, putting them out, seeing it published, and what you get out of that as a medical student as a way to advertise and tell people, hey, this is worth doing. It's worth your time, even when you're studying for exams and getting into interview season and sub-Is and everything. Make the pitch for why medical students should write you and get involved.
Yeah, so it was definitely we started this and I want to say November we first started with the idea. And it definitely, if anything, it grew my interest in neurosurgery because again, I'm only a second year. So there's no guarantee when you're a first year that you're gonna go into it. But one thing that was really great about it is the mentorship that you get because again, I'm only a second year. But when we were starting this, the idea kind of snowballed before making its way to Dr. Hines between Tony Chen, who's a fellow second year with me, and then Preston Carey, who's a fourth year medical student applying into neurosurgery now. And then that mentorship with us and Preston then made its way to Dr. Hines. And then we kind of grew the team to about, I think we had 25 people from Jefferson on the team. And then also Mike Baldessari, who's a resident at Jeff. And it was just a great networking point to have. But it was also nice to have other people that were supporting you and it was very easy in terms of, as you said, the time load when you're busy. When we had 25 people, about the writers wrote, I think for the two issues, they split it. So one writer only wrote one article and then an editor read two. So it really, I asked them feedback about it and they said it only took about an hour to do. And then you met the editor who was usually about a fourth year medical student. They were paired with a first year medical student and they had a great way to network and meet new people. And then you also had the fourth year medical students together and all of the second and third years together as well. So it's a great way to get involved and to meet other people in the same position as you. And also just a great way to develop mentorship, especially if you're at a program that doesn't necessarily have the big like neurosurgical presence like Jefferson does. And a lot of students interested in neurosurgery, it's a great way to get involved and meet other people before you're kind of on the residency trail.
Yeah, Dr. Hines, let me ask you about an interesting thing that came to my mind. Talking to folks like Fred Barker, who's obviously the editor of JNS, Journal of Neurosurgery, and Doug Konzioka from the Red Journal, and it comes up every now and then. Ed Benzel talks about this too, and I don't know, like if your newsletter really grows, right? This concept of circular citation, right? In other words, let's say like a nefarious individual, and it may not even be nefarious, plants a paper in like a lesser journal, and then somehow it ends up getting reviewed by your eminent newsletter, right? And then feeds forward into like some editorial. You know what I'm talking about, right? They blame some of the opiate pandemic on this type of circular it could be virtuous, I suppose. It could also be non-virtuous cyclic publication. Do you guys do you think this is just not a reality for what you're doing, or do you think there's a level of responsibility in terms of what you guys do? Because you're basically like the game of telephone, right? Like you're taking information, you're reprocessing, repackaging, and redelivering, which has obviously a lot of virtue, value, and power. But then there's also this responsibility side, right? And I don't want to be overly negative. I'm just thinking about it out loud.
I think that's a great point, and that's a thing that we're probably still grappling with. I would say at this point is what is the as this grows, what is the process? Because say this becomes a great outlet, people are constantly going to it. You're right. What we select will have a higher visibility depending on the viewership. I think part of that is mitigated by a larger team, a larger base of writers, editors who are you know that's one of the benefits of being very early career and early med students is there's not as much entanglement professionally, academically. So what is interesting to the medical students, right? And I'm sure every once in a while someone more senior might say, hey, did you notice this was interesting to me. But at the same time, I think the goal is to let a lot of students who are trying to learn neurosurgery find what's helpful for them and put it there. And if there's high impact writers who want some feed forward, who are reaching out to our medical students to try to get some attention, I mean, that's great for the medical students. That's great networking. And I would say that that's maybe a different scenario anyway. So I think that having a large base is, like I am not handpicking the articles and saying this is what we do, right? I think that's the strength of it, is that it's what interests the medical students and helps them out.
Yeah, it might even be like a measure of success, like when you see the first time you put on Claude or whatever Perplexity or Grok, and it's like, oh yeah, well the neurosurgery newsletter says this, right? I mean, it is very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, as you said, I'm looking on the website now. Yeah, the first issue is back in November, so we're very early on in the process. So as we wrap up here, maybe for the people listening and watching who want to subscribe to the newsletter, give them a sense of what to expect in the coming weeks and months as you continue to grow and put out content. What are your goals for 2026 in terms of growing the newsletter and filling our inboxes with neurosurgical glory?
Yeah, I mean, I think quite simply, we'd like to get some regular output, some dependable readership, so people know that they're going to get something to read. I think that's always step one. We can grow the base, and really, it's to kind of establish a community space, and hopefully a place that we can spin off some other projects from here with medical students to give them that community as they're trying to look into neurosurgery. I think Mary had some great ideas for potential things we could do in the future. I'd be happy to, Mary, if you want to let them know some of your awesome ideas for this.
Sure. So we were talking about these, but one of the main ones that we wanted to do was maybe doing kind of a monthly journal club over Zoom. So that way it's still research focused, but you don't have to, because we do these with our Jefferson ANS program where a resident will come in and discuss articles with us. So we're thinking maybe extending that to a Zoom level through the newsletter where maybe your article was featured in the newsletter last week, and now for this month, you're going to come on and talk about it, and people can just hop on from anywhere and pose questions, listen to what you have to say. So that was one specific thing. And then another, we were just kind of focusing on medical education, whether that be through kind of residents throwing on like suture videos, how to's, or just interviews on advice for the residency trail, how to do like pick your sub I's, how to get letters of rec, how to ask, how to get a mentor, that type of thing. So we definitely in the long term want to try and make this into more of a medical education focused website. But for right now, we're definitely trying to stick with the newsletter and making sure we can keep going and hopefully get to the weekly release. But for right now, at least we're building our team, so it will probably be monthly. And then as we kind of get used to it and get in the groove, hopefully we'll be getting it to a weekly publication.
There's a lot of great student resources out there. You know, there was a medical student's guide to neurosurgery published a while ago that lists a lot of great resources. I know, you know, there's a lot of challenges navigating the process, and it keeps changing. You guys had the podcast episode a little while back talking about kind of the arms race and the way of grading research and how people are involved. And I think having more emphasis around critically evaluating and reading the research and summarizing and understanding the impact may help promote good academic and not just churn and burn kind of writing as people are trying to get into the field. So, you know, a lot of hopefully community aspect, I think, would be the theme in the future.
Yeah. Well, this is a noble enterprise in its early days. We will link in the show notes or the episode notes to the website for everyone watching and listening so that you can do what I'm about to do as soon as we log off here and subscribe to the Neurosurgical Newsletter. I look forward to seeing what comes of it in 2026, and in particular, arguing with everyone on the internet about every article that you share. But for tonight, thank you so much for coming on the show. Everybody subscribe to the Neurosurgical Newsletter. Dr. Kevin Hines, Mary Pontarelli, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.